Stop everything and listen to me right now. On March 5th, 2026, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced plans to transition 70% of all adjustment of status, naturalization, and benefit application interviews to a mandatory digital format by October 1st, 2026, fundamentally transforming how immigration interviews are conducted and creating new challenges and risks for millions of applicants. If you have a pending green card application, if you're preparing to file for naturalization, if you're expecting an interview for any USCIS benefit in the next 12 months, or if you're an immigration attorney who represents clients at interviews, what I'm about to tell you will completely change how you need to prepare, what technology requirements you'll face, and what new pitfalls could derail your case if you're not ready. This isn't a pilot program or a voluntary option. This is a mandatory system-wide change that will affect every USCIS field office and application center across the country. And immigration attorneys are calling it the most disruptive procedural change USCIS has implemented in decades. Stay with me for the next 30 minutes, because I'm going to break down exactly what this digital interview system entails, how it differs from traditional in-person interviews, what technical requirements and challenges applicants will face, who's most vulnerable under this new system, and the 3 critical steps you must take immediately to prepare for digital interviews and protect your application. Let me start with what USCIS is actually proposing, because understanding the scope and the mechanism of this change is essential. The March 5th announcement, titled Modernizing Immigration Services Through Digital Engagement, outlines a plan to move the majority of USCIS interviews from in-person appointments at field offices to remote video interviews conducted through a proprietary USCIS digital platform. Under this plan, applicants for adjustment of status, that's people applying for green cards while in the United States, applicants for naturalization seeking U.S. citizenship, applicants for removal of conditions on residence, and applicants for various other benefits will no longer travel to USCIS offices for face-to-face interviews with immigration officers. Instead, they'll receive notice that their interview will be conducted remotely on a specific date and time, and they'll be required to log into the USCIS digital interview platform from their home or another location with internet access and appear via video conference. The platform, which USCIS is calling the Virtual Interview and Document Exchange System, or VIDAS, requires applicants to have a computer or tablet with a camera, microphone, and speakers, a stable high-speed internet connection of at least 10 megabits per second, and the ability to upload and display documents in real time during the interview. The interviews will be recorded both video and audio, and those recordings will become part of the official case record. Immigration officers will conduct interviews from USCIS offices or potentially from remote work locations, and the interviews are expected to last the same duration as traditional in-person interviews, typically 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on case complexity. Now, USCIS is framing this as a modernization initiative that will increase efficiency, reduce wait times for interview scheduling, eliminate the need for applicants to travel to field offices, which can be expensive and time-consuming, and allow USCIS to process cases faster by removing physical space constraints. The announcement claims that digital interviews will be just as thorough and fair as in-person interviews, while providing greater convenience and accessibility for applicants. But immigration attorneys and immigrant advocacy organizations are raising serious concerns about this initiative, and their concerns are well-founded based on what we know about how similar systems have functioned in other immigration contexts. Let me give you some context about why this change is happening now and what's driving it. USCIS has been moving toward digital processes for several years. Online filing of applications, digital case status tracking, Electronic notices instead of paper mail. During the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and 2021, when USCIS field offices were closed or operating at limited capacity, the agency conducted some interviews remotely via telephone or video conference on an emergency basis. Those remote interviews were generally viewed as inferior to in-person interviews because of technology problems, difficulty verifying identities, limited ability for officers to assess demeanor and credibility, and challenges with reviewing documents. But despite these problems, USCIS saw that remote interviews allowed them to continue processing cases when offices were closed, and they apparently concluded that making this permanent could solve their capacity constraints. The current system, where applicants come to field offices for in-person interviews, is constrained by physical space. Each USCIS field office has a limited number of interview rooms, a limited number of officers, and limited hours of operation. This creates bottlenecks where interview wait times can be 6 months or more in busy offices. By moving to digital interviews where officers don't need physical interview rooms and can conduct interviews from anywhere, USCIS can theoretically schedule more interviews per day per officer and reduce wait times. That's the efficiency argument. But the trade-off is that you're removing the face-to-face human element of the interview process. You're introducing technology barriers that disproportionately affect certain populations. And you're creating new opportunities for technical problems to derail cases. Now, let's talk about who this affects and in what ways. Adjustment of status interviews for family-based green cards, marriages to U.S. citizens, parent-child relationships, other family sponsorships, are some of the most sensitive and important interviews in the immigration system. These interviews are where USCIS officers assess whether marriages are bona fide or fraudulent, whether family relationships are genuine, and whether applicants are credible. Officers look at body language. They observe how couples interact with each other. They note whether answers are spontaneous or rehearsed. They watch for signs of nervousness or deception. Can you really do all of that effectively through a video screen? Many immigration attorneys are skeptical. Let me paint you a picture of what could go wrong. Imagine Maria and James, a married couple where Maria is adjusting status based on marriage to U.S. citizen James. Under the traditional system, they'd go to their local USCIS field office. They'd sit across a desk from an immigration officer, and they'd answer questions about their relationship while the officer observes their demeanor, how they look at each other, how they respond to questions, all the subtle cues that help an officer assess credibility. Now, imagine the same interview happening via video conference. Maria and James are sitting at home in front of a laptop. The internet connection is a bit choppy, causing occasional freezes and audio delays. The officer is in a USCIS office or working from home, looking at them through a screen. Maria is nervous about the technology and keeps looking at the wrong camera, making it seem like she's not making eye contact. James's audio cuts out briefly during a key answer about when they met, and the officer asks him to repeat himself, which makes him seem evasive, even though it was just technical difficulty. The officer asks to see their photo albums, and James tries to hold photos up to the camera, but they're blurry and hard to see. So the officer asks them to scan and upload them, which takes several minutes and disrupts the flow of the interview. All of these small technical issues could create negative impressions that affect the outcome of the case. Or consider a naturalization interview where an applicant is being tested on English language ability and civics knowledge. In person, the officer can clearly hear the applicant's pronunciation, can assess whether they're reading answers from notes or responding from memory, and can adjust the pace and style of questioning based on the applicant's comprehension level. Let me walk you through the populations that are most vulnerable under a mandatory digital interview system. First, elderly applicants who may not be comfortable with technology, who may not have reliable internet access, or who may struggle to navigate a video conferencing platform. Imagine an 80-year-old green card holder applying for naturalization who has limited experience with computers, doesn't own a laptop or tablet, and doesn't have high-speed internet at home. Under the old system, they could go to a USCIS field office with their attorney or a family member who could help them navigate the process. Under the new system, they're required to somehow acquire technology they don't have, learn how to use it, and conduct their citizenship interview through a platform they've never used before. This creates enormous barriers, low-income applicants who don't have access to necessary technology. Not everyone owns a computer or tablet with a camera and microphone. Not everyone has high-speed internet at their home. Many immigrant families are living paycheck to paycheck, and requiring them to purchase technology or pay for internet service that they otherwise wouldn't need just to attend an immigration interview creates a financial barrier that disproportionately affects the most vulnerable. USCIS's announcement mentions that applicants can use public libraries or community centers that have computer access. But this assumes those facilities will have private spaces where applicants can conduct confidential interviews about their immigration status, which is often not the case. Third, applicants with disabilities, hearing impairments, visual impairments, mobility issues, cognitive disabilities may face significant challenges with digital interviews that they wouldn't face with in-person interviews. Where accommodations can be more easily provided, a hearing-impaired applicant who uses a sign language interpreter, for example, might find that interpreting through video with potential delays and connection issues is much more difficult than in-person interpretation. An applicant with limited vision might struggle to see documents on a screen or to navigate the platform's interface. Fourth, applicants in rural areas or areas with poor internet infrastructure may simply not have access to the required internet speeds. The USCIS technical requirements specify at least 10 megabits per second download speed, but many rural areas of the United States have internet speeds far below that, and some areas have no broadband access at all. Are people in these areas simply out of luck? Are they required to relocate temporarily to conduct their interviews? This is general information, not legal advice, but let me walk you through the technical requirements USCIS has published for the VITAS platform, because understanding these details helps you prepare. Applicants must have a device running Windows 10 or higher, macOS 10.15 or higher, or a tablet running iOS 14 or Android 10 or higher. Older devices won't work. The device must have a built-in or external webcam capable of at least 720p resolution, a microphone, and speakers or headphones. You must have Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge browsers. Safari and Firefox are not supported. You need that 10 megabits per second internet connection, and USCIS recommends a wired connection rather than Wi-Fi because wireless can be less stable. During the interview, you must be in a quiet, well-lit, private space with no one else present, unless they're also applicants on the same case. So, spouses in a marriage-based case can both be present, but you can't have friends or family members in the room unless they're interpreters, approved in advance by USCIS. You must position the camera so your full face and upper body are visible at all times. You cannot wear sunglasses, hats, or anything else that obscures your face. You must have your documents ready in digital format to upload through the platform if requested. Birth certificates, marriage certificates, photos, financial records, whatever USCIS might ask to see. And you must sign a document at the beginning of the interview certifying that you're alone, that no one is coaching you, and that you're not recording the interview yourself. The platform includes identity verification technology that uses facial recognition to confirm you are who you claim to be by comparing your video image to your passport or other ID documents. It also includes AI-powered fraud detection that analyzes your eye movements, facial expressions, and voice patterns looking for signs of deception or coaching. USCIS claims this technology makes digital interviews even more secure than in-person interviews, but privacy advocates and civil liberties organizations are raising alarms about the use of AI in immigration decisions, particularly given research showing that facial recognition technology is less accurate for people of color, and that algorithmic bias could lead to false fraud flags. Now let's talk about what happens when technology fails during an interview, because this is where the system's vulnerabilities become most apparent. According to USCIS guidance, if technical issues cause the interview to be interrupted, your internet cuts out, the platform crashes, audio or video stops working, the interview will be paused, and you'll be given an opportunity to reconnect within 10 minutes. If you cannot reconnect within 10 minutes, the interview will be rescheduled. But here's the critical detail. The rescheduling could take several weeks or months, depending on availability. And if technical issues cause multiple interruptions or reschedules, USCIS guidance suggests that could be viewed as a negative factor in your case, with officers questioning whether you're deliberately causing technical problems to avoid answering questions. This creates an impossible situation where applicants are penalized for technical problems that may be beyond their control. If you live in an area with unreliable internet and your connection drops during the interview, that's not your fault, but it could still harm your case. If USCIS's own platform has bugs or capacity issues that cause interviews to fail, which is extremely likely given the government's track record with technology rollouts, applicants will bear the consequences through delays and potential negative inferences about their credibility. Let me give you another scenario that illustrates the problems. Ahmed is applying for naturalization. He's been a green card holder for 6 years. He meets all the requirements, and his application should be straightforward. He doesn't own a computer, so he arranges to use a computer at his local public library for his digital interview. On the day of the interview, he goes to the library, checks out a computer in the public area, and logs into the USCIS platform. But the library computers are older models with outdated software, and the USCIS platform doesn't function properly. The video keeps freezing and the audio is garbled. Ahmed tries to troubleshoot, but he's not tech-savvy and he doesn't know how to fix the problems. After 15 minutes of failed attempts to get the interview working, the USCIS officer terminates the session and tells Ahmed he'll have to reschedule. Ahmed gets a notice 2 weeks later that his interview has been rescheduled for 4 months later due to capacity constraints. What should have been a 30-minute interview that leads to citizenship approval has now been delayed by months because of technology problems that weren't Ahmed's fault and that he had no way to prevent. Or consider Svetlana, who's adjusting status based on marriage to a U.S. citizen. Her interview is scheduled via Vides. During the interview, the USCIS officer asks to see photos of her wedding. Svetlana has printed photos in a physical album, but the officer tells her she needs to upload digital copies through the platform. Svetlana doesn't have a scanner at home, and she doesn't know how to use her phone to scan and upload documents. She asks if she can show the printed photos to the camera, but the officer says that's not acceptable because the image quality is too poor for the recording. The officer gives Svetlana 10 minutes to figure out how to scan and upload the photos. Svetlana panics, tries to use her phone camera to photograph the photos and upload them, but the files are too large and won't upload through the platform. After 10 minutes of unsuccessful attempts, the officer moves on without seeing the wedding photos and notes in the case file that the applicant was unable to provide requested evidence, which becomes a negative factor in the adjudication. These scenarios aren't hypothetical worst cases. They're the kinds of problems that routinely occur with video conference technology. And when they happen during immigration interviews, where the stakes are your ability to remain in the country or obtain citizenship, the consequences are devastating. Now let's address what USCIS is saying about exceptions and accommodations. The March 5th announcement states that applicants can request exemption from digital interviews and request in-person interviews instead if they can demonstrate good cause. Good cause includes lack of access to required technology, disability that prevents use of digital platform, religious or cultural reasons why video recording would be inappropriate, or other compelling circumstances. But here's the problem. Requesting an exemption requires submitting a separate form with detailed explanation and supporting evidence. And USCIS will adjudicate these requests with discretion to approve or deny. There's no guarantee your exemption request will be granted, and if it's denied, you're stuck with the digital interview requirement. Moreover, requesting an exemption will likely delay your case by several months as USCIS processes the request. So, you're choosing between trying to navigate the problematic digital system or accepting significant delays. For disability accommodations, USCIS says they'll work with applicants to provide reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the guidance is vague about what accommodations will actually be available in a digital format. If you're deaf and need a sign language interpreter, USCIS says an interpreter can participate in the digital interview, but coordinating three-way video with applicant, interpreter, and officer introduces additional complexity and potential for technical problems. Let me start by addressing the most urgent question everyone's asking. If you have an interview scheduled, or if you're expecting to be scheduled for an interview in the next 6 to 12 months, what do you need to do right now to prepare for the possibility that it will be digital rather than in person? The October 1st, 2026 implementation date means that any interview scheduled from that date forward will likely be digital unless you successfully request and receive an exemption. But USCIS has indicated they may begin piloting the system as early as July or August at select field offices. So even if your interview is scheduled before October, you could potentially be subject to the digital format. Here are the 3 critical steps you must take immediately. Step 1. Assess your technology situation and address any gaps right now, not later. Inventory what you have. Do you own a computer or tablet that meets USCIS requirements? Do you have a working webcam and microphone? Do you have reliable, high-speed internet at your home? Test your internet speed using one of the free online speed test tools. You need at least 10 megabits per second download, and preferably more for stability. If you don't meet these requirements, you need to either acquire the necessary technology and services, or you need to identify where you can access them. A family member's home, a community center, an attorney's office, and make concrete arrangements to use those resources. If purchasing technology is not financially feasible, contact immigrant services organizations in your area and ask if they have programs to help applicants with technology access for USCIS interviews. Some organizations are already starting to establish resource centers specifically for this purpose. If you absolutely cannot access the required technology, begin preparing your request for exemption from digital interviews now. Gather documentation of your financial situation, evidence of lack of internet access in your area, disability documentation if applicable, whatever evidence supports your good cause claim. Work with an immigration attorney to prepare the strongest possible exemption request, understanding that approval is not guaranteed and the process will delay your case. Step 2. Practice with video conferencing technology well before your interview. Do not wait until the day of your interview to figure out how to use video platforms. Download Zoom, Skype, or other video conferencing apps and practice having video calls with friends or family members. Get comfortable looking at the camera rather than at the screen, which creates the appearance of eye contact. Practice in the space where you plan to conduct your interview and test the lighting, sound quality, and internet stability in that location. Have someone take a screenshot or photo of what you look like on video from that location, And make sure you're well lit, clearly visible, and professionally presented. Practice uploading and sharing documents through various platforms so you're comfortable with the mechanics. If you're planning to have an interpreter present, which is your right for any USCIS interview, practice three-way video calls where one person is the applicant, one is the interpreter, and one plays the role of the immigration officer, so you can work out the logistics of turn-taking and communication flow through video. If you're married and both spouses will be present for the interview, practice together so you're both comfortable with the format. Step 3. Work with your immigration attorney to develop a specific strategy for your digital interview. This is more important than ever because the digital format creates new challenges that require professional guidance. Your attorney should help you prepare for the interview by conducting mock interviews via video so you can practice in a format that mimics what the actual interview will be like. The attorney should help you organize all your documentary evidence in digital format. Scan every document, organize everything into clearly labeled folders on your computer, and have everything ready to access and upload quickly during the interview. Discuss with your attorney whether they can or should be present during the digital interview. USCIS guidance is unclear about whether attorneys can participate in digital interviews the same way they participate in in-person interviews, where they're present in the room but generally don't speak unless there are legal issues or procedural problems. Some immigration attorneys are interpreting the guidance to mean they can join the video call as a participant, while others believe USCIS will prohibit attorney participation in digital interviews. This needs to be clarified, and your attorney needs to advocate for your right to have counsel present, even in a digital format. Your attorney should also help you prepare for worst-case scenarios. What happens if the technology fails during your interview? What do you say? How do you document what happened? What are your rights if USCIS tries to penalize you for technical problems? Having clear guidance on these contingencies before you go into the interview can prevent panic and mistakes if things go wrong. Now let's talk about the legal challenges that are already emerging against this digital interview mandate. As of mid-March 2026, several lawsuits have been filed in federal courts challenging USCIS's authority to implement mandatory digital interviews without going through proper rulemaking procedures. The American Immigration Lawyers Association filed suit in the District of Columbia on March 12th, arguing that this represents a substantive change to how immigration benefits are adjudicated, and therefore requires notice and comment rulemaking under the Administrative Procedure Act. They're arguing that USCIS cannot simply announce a major operational change through a policy memo and expect it to have the force of law. They need to publish a proposed rule, allow public comment, respond to those comments, and then issue a final rule. Separately, disability rights organizations have filed suit arguing that mandatory digital interviews violate the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act by creating barriers for people with disabilities and by failing to provide adequate accommodations. These organizations are seeking a preliminary injunction blocking the October 1st implementation until USCIS can demonstrate that the system is accessible and that meaningful accommodations are available. And several immigrant rights organizations have filed suit challenging the use of AI-powered fraud detection technology, arguing that it violates due process because applicants don't know what the AI is analyzing, don't have the opportunity to confront or challenge algorithmic determinations, and are subject to potentially biased technology that hasn't been adequately tested or validated. These lawsuits seek to prohibit USCIS from using any AI or algorithmic decision-making tools in immigration adjudications. These cases are in very early stages, and it will be months before any substantive rulings. There's a possibility that courts could issue preliminary injunctions blocking or delaying the October 1st implementation, but there's also a strong possibility that courts will defer to USCIS's operational discretion and allow the system to move forward. Even if litigation ultimately succeeds in several years, that won't help people whose interviews happen in 2026 and 2027 while the cases are being litigated. Let me address what this digital transformation means for the broader future of immigration adjudication. What USCIS is doing with interviews is part of a larger trend toward automation, remote processing, and reduced human interaction in immigration services. We're seeing similar moves toward algorithmic pre-screening of applications, automated fraud detection, digital document verification using blockchain technology, and AI-assisted adjudication where officers are given recommendations by algorithms about whether to approve or deny cases. USCIS frames all of this as modernization and efficiency improvement, but what it really represents is a fundamental shift away from individualized, human-centered adjudication towards systematized, algorithm-driven processing, where applicants are data points rather than people. This shift has profound implications for fairness and due process. Immigration law has always recognized that cases are nuanced, that credibility assessments require human judgment, that circumstances matter, and that discretion is necessary to achieve just outcomes. When you remove the human element, when interviews happen through video screens, when algorithms flag cases as potentially fraudulent, when officers make decisions based on standardized criteria rather than holistic assessment, you lose the ability to do individualized justice. You create a system that's efficient at processing volume, but poor at recognizing the human stakes and the real-world consequences of immigration decisions. Here's the legal disclaimer. This is general information about USCIS's planned digital interview system as of mid-March 2026. This is not legal advice, and it's not a substitute for consulting with a qualified immigration attorney about your specific case. The implementation timeline, technical requirements, and procedures are all subject to change. Legal challenges could delay or modify the system, and every applicant's situation is unique. You need personalized legal guidance to navigate this new landscape and to prepare effectively for whatever interview format you ultimately face. Let me leave you with this. We are witnessing the transformation of the U.S. immigration system into something that looks more like an automated processing pipeline than a human adjudication system. Digital interviews are just one piece of this larger transformation, but they're a significant piece because interviews are where the human dimension of immigration cases has traditionally been most visible, where officers meet applicants face-to-face, where credibility is assessed through direct human interaction, where discretion and judgment come into play. The shift to digital interviews will make the system more efficient in some ways, but it will also make it more impersonal, more vulnerable to technical failures, more dependent on technology that not everyone can access, and more prone to errors and injustices that result from reducing complex human situations to video calls and algorithmic analyses. If you're going through the immigration system now or in the near future, you need to adapt to this new reality while also advocating for your rights and pushing back against aspects of the system that are unjust or unfair. If this video has helped you understand what's coming with digital interviews and what you need to do to prepare, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for ongoing coverage of USCIS policy changes and for practical guidance on navigating the immigration system as it continues to evolve. Share this video with anyone who has pending applications or upcoming interviews because they need to start preparing now. Your immigration case, your interview, and your future in America are all being affected by this digital transformation. Stay informed, stay prepared. Invest in the technology and practice you need to succeed in this new format, and get professional legal help to navigate these changes. This is too important to face unprepared, and the stakes are too high to leave anything to chance.